was Bach's Prelude in C major, and that is actually the opening piece of the Well-Tempered Clavier. That is a very, very important piece of work for us as pianists, because what Bach did in that is that he wanted to prove that the tuning of perfect fourths, which is the tuning that we have now, a whole octave could be divided in 12 semitones, which are these keys that we have right here, and that any piece could be composed in both major and minor, in any key, and it actually sound good. And he not only did that once, and he wrote that in 24 keys, so he has C major and C minor, C sharp major, C sharp minor, or D flat major, but he actually did it twice. So we have a Well-Tempered Clavier Book 1 and Well-Tempered Clavier Book 2. So it is actually because of Bach that we have this tuning in a modern day piano. Now, one thing to note is that Bach actually did not ever touch a piano, because this didn't exist until much later. He's from the Baroque era, and he was used to playing on a harpsichord. And a harpsichord is different than a piano, because a piano has hammers that hit the strings, while a harpsichord plucks them. So it often sounds like a guitar. So I like to imagine that Bach was actually blocking these chords and then actually started plucking them. And that's how he came up with this beautiful prelude. That's my story of it. But all right, let's dive right in. The first thing to note is that every single measure has a chord that is played twice. So the first chord that we have is a C major chord. However, Bach breaks it in two hands. So the bottom two notes are always going to be on the left hand, and the top three notes are always going to be on the right hand. A good way to practice this is by first knowing the harmony of the downbeats in every single measure. So it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first 5 notes of each measure, you're going to play that 2 times in a row. So practice blocking it 2 times in a row. The first chord, 2 times. The next chord, we have C, D, A, D, F. Block that twice. The next chord, we have B, D, G, D, F. Block that twice. And go back to C major. So let's do that whole thing again one time. Ready? And C major. Next chord, which is a D minor over C. G7. And that's basically all it is. However, now we're going to break it. So let's break it. Instead of blocking it together, let's go. And then it repeats the right hand twice. So you're basically doing, and make sure you hold this. If you notice in your score, the first note is a half note. That means you're going to hold it out. And the top note is a dotted eighth note to a quarter note, also holding it out. So you have right hand, 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 right hand. But now let's break it. Ready, and. That's basically what's happening throughout the entire piece. However, we do have different harmonies. But a couple of pointers as you learn this piece. One is that the right hand is meant to almost sound a little bit floaty. So don't be too harsh on the right hand, because that breaks the character of it. The word prelude actually means opening. So it was an opening piece that he could play. A lot of times preludes are associated with playing at church or playing at some kind of service. So, and also a fun fact, later they made this arrangement for violin and piano. And it's really beautiful. It's Bach Gunod. So Another thing that I want you to pay attention to is the balance, making sure the left hand is perhaps a little bit more grounded than the right hand is. And I like to accent the bass a little bit. I like to accent that so that I also can hear the change of harmony. Last thing I'm going to tell you about this is to be careful with the pedal. I know that this is one harmony, so technically you could leave the pedal down for that. Another pedal, but I like to clean it on every new bass note so that the sound doesn't accumulate too much. Clean, 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 clean. So those are a couple of technical things that you might want to pay attention to as you're learning this. Now, speaking musically and speaking phrase-wise, we have a lot of 4 and 8 measure phrases. The first phrase is this. So how do we want to shape that? Do we want it to all be the same? Do we want to maybe lean into a chord a little bit more? I like that a little bit better. And so as you walk through every single chord, it's almost like a hymn. It's so perfect. Make the choice of seeing which chords am I going to lean into, which chords am I going to back away from. And usually your arrival, for example, this is starting at measure 5. Measure 6, measure 7, 8, 9, and then. So I like arriving to this, we've modulated here to the key of G major. I like arriving there with a little bit more calmness. I don't want to arrive there with a lot of emphasis. So as like I said, you're playing through these, make the choice of where am I going to emphasize and where am I not going to. And then also musically speaking, there are some chords that I like to take a little bit of time on. For example, toward the end of the page we have this, and then it's just this. It's so beautiful. So I like to take a little bit of time there so that when I get to this, I don't have to take as much time. So don't overdo it, right? So just be selective. Also because this is not a romantic piece, so we're not going to go, that's not stylistically correct. So we want to make sure that it still has to have this Baroque feeling, but this a nice place. It's not too much, but, and then it happens one time later here. Now, as you get to the chords that are more, this diminished chord that we have here, that one Bach does give us a little bit of permission to lean into those more, and then here on the, and then I also like to push the tempo a little bit. And then here, when we finally arrive here, maybe taking a little time. And then here we have this pedal point. A pedal point means that we have this bass while the harmony on top is changing. So starting on the 3rd line of the 2nd page, we have G, G, the chord on top is changing, G, G again. This is just the pedal point. So you see how it almost rises, right? It gives us a little bit more of and then suddenly, it gives us this like dramatic effect that suddenly resolves here. And then here. And then we go, he's leading us back into our home key of C. And then again, now we have a pedal point on C. This is a C7, F major, and then we like to end usually rolling the chord, also because that's stylistic, where in the harpsichord, they would finish like this. And I don't think this ends very triumphantly. I actually think it just ends very majestically and very, almost very sure of itself, but not trying to be this like bombastic thing. Bach, in all of his pieces, he wrote for the glory and honor of God. So he was definitely a very devout man. And he was also the music director at his church. So everything he was always thinking of, I imagine the acoustics that there was there. He was a great organ player, and he would write for choirs, and he would write all of this music with that in mind. And so as you play it and as you start to explore these different harmonic colors, think of what they would sound like at a church. Think of what they would sound like with, you know, on an organ and in this acoustics of, you know, all this echo happening, and how would that influence the way that you would interpret it, right? So this is not a very difficult piece, but it is a very, it is a piece where it's easy to get carried away in wanting to make it beautiful, but don't do more than what you have to. It's already very beautiful. It's already very perfect. So we always want to respect what the composer does. We do want to inform ourselves on how to play it, but also keeping in mind that at the end of the day, we are not the composers of this, so don't go overboard and try to make it, you know, very extra. I've heard this piece played in so many ways. It's often played at weddings, and it's played in a lot of creative instances, but I think simplicity is key here. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope that you continue to explore Bach's music and keep playing.